I, 34F, don't even know where to start with this. I've been married to my husband Mark, 36M, for 8 years, and we've been together for 10. I thought I knew everything about him, but I just discovered something that has completely shattered my world, and I don't know what to do. I need to be honest up front. I snooped on Mark's phone, which I know is wrong. I've never done anything like this before in our entire relationship, but something had been feeling off for the past few months, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something from me. Mark has been acting differently lately, more secretive with his phone, staying up late texting after I've gone to bed, and being vague about where he's been or who he's been talking to. When I'd ask him about it, he'd just say it was work stuff or friends, but something in his tone made me feel like he wasn't being completely honest. Last week, Mark left his phone on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower, and it kept buzzing with notifications. I told myself I was just going to check if it was something urgent from work, but once I picked up his phone, I couldn't stop myself from looking deeper. What I found has turned my entire world upside down. Mark has been active on several dating apps, but not the ones you'd expect. He's been on Grindr and a few other apps that are specifically for men looking to meet other men. His profiles all say he's looking for discreet encounters and exploring his sexuality. I found months of conversations with different men, some just chatting, others much more explicit. In these conversations, Mark talks about being married to a woman but being attracted to men and wanting to explore that side of himself. But here's what really broke my heart. In several of these conversations, Mark talks about how he's always known he was bisexual, but has never felt like he could be open about it. He says that he's been struggling with this part of himself for years, and that he feels like he's living a lie. In one conversation from about 2 months ago, Mark told someone that he loves me, but that he feels like he's been pretending to be someone he's not for our entire relationship. He said that he's never been able to be honest about his sexuality because he was afraid of how I would react. What's even more devastating is that I found evidence that Mark has actually met up with at least 3 different men over the past 4 months. The messages make it clear that these weren't just coffee dates, they were sexual encounters. I've been sitting on this information for 3 days now, and I feel like I'm going crazy. I haven't confronted Mark yet because I honestly don't know what to say or how to even begin this conversation. Part of me is devastated that Mark has been cheating on me with other people, regardless of their gender. The betrayal and lies hurt so much that I can barely function. But another part of me is heartbroken for Mark, because I can see from his messages how much he's been struggling with his identity and how isolated he's felt. He's been carrying the secret for our entire relationship, and I can't imagine how difficult that must have been for him. I'm also questioning everything about our relationship now. Were Mark's feelings for me ever real, or was he just using our marriage as a cover for his sexuality? Has he been attracted to me at all, or have I just been a convenient beard for him? Our sex life has always been good, or at least I thought it was. Mark has always been attentive and seemed to enjoy being intimate with me. But now I'm wondering if he was just going through the motions or thinking about someone else the entire time. I'm also wondering if there have been signs that I missed over the years. Mark has always been very supportive of LGBTQ+ rights and causes, which I always admired about him, but now I'm wondering if that was coming from a personal place that he never shared with me. Mark has also always been very private about his past relationships and doesn't talk much about his dating life before we met. When we first got together, he told me that he'd mostly dated women but had been in a few experimental relationships in college that he didn't want to get into details about. At the time, I assumed he meant he'd had some casual relationships or maybe dated someone much older or younger than him. It never occurred to me that he might have been referring to relationships with men. I'm also realizing that Mark has always been very careful about his online presence and social media. He doesn't post much about our relationship, and when he does, it's always very generic. I used to think he was just a private person, but now I'm wondering if he was trying to keep his options open. The worst part is that I can see from his messages that Mark has been genuinely struggling with this. In one conversation, he talks about feeling like he's been living a double life and how exhausting it is to constantly hide who he really is. He talks about loving me but feeling like he can't be his real self in our marriage. He says that he's been trying to figure out how to tell me about his sexuality, but that he's terrified of losing me and destroying our life together. Reading these messages, I can see that Mark is in pain and has been for a long time. But I'm also incredibly hurt that he chose to explore his sexuality by cheating on me rather than having an honest conversation about what he was going through. I understand that coming out, even to your spouse, can be incredibly difficult and scary. I like to think that I'm an accepting and open-minded person, and I would have been supportive if Mark had come to me and told me that he was questioning his sexuality or wanted to explore that part of himself. But instead of trusting me with this part of himself, Mark chose to lie to me and go behind my back. He's been having sexual relationships with other people without my knowledge or consent, which feels like a huge violation of our marriage vows and our trust. I'm also struggling with what this means for our future. If Mark is bisexual and has been suppressing this part of himself for our entire relationship, can our marriage survive? Does he want to continue being married to a woman, or has he realized that he wants to be with men? Some of the messages I read suggest that Mark is more attracted to men than he's ever been to women, which makes me question whether he can be satisfied in a heterosexual marriage long term. I'm also worried about the practical implications of all of this. Mark has been having unprotected sex with other people, based on what I read in his messages, which means he's potentially exposed both of us to STDs. I'm going to have to get tested, which is humiliating and scary. I keep going back and forth between feeling angry at Mark for betraying our marriage and feeling sympathetic to his struggle with his identity. I love him, and I want to be supportive, but I also feel like he's been living a lie for our entire relationship. I don't know if I can trust Mark anymore, and I don't know if our marriage can survive this level of deception. Even if Mark is willing to be honest about his sexuality going forward, how do I know that he won't continue to lie to me about other important things? I also don't know if I can handle being married to someone who might be more attracted to men than to me. I want to be with someone who chooses me because they're genuinely attracted to me and want to be with me, not because I'm a safe or convenient option. At the same time, I feel guilty for even having these thoughts. Mark's sexuality isn't something he chose, and I don't want to be someone who can't accept their partner for who they really are. But the cheating and lying are choices that Mark made, and I don't know if I can forgive him for that. I'm supposed to go to a work conference next week, and Mark and I had planned to use that time apart to reconnect when I get back. The irony of that is not lost on me. I don't know whether I should confront Mark before I leave or wait until I get back. Part of me wants to get this conversation over with, but another part of me thinks I need more time to process what I've learned and figure out what I want to say. I also don't know whether I should contact a lawyer or a therapist first. I feel like I need professional help, but I'm not sure what kind of help would be most useful. Has anyone else been in a similar situation? How did you handle discovering that your spouse had been hiding their sexuality from you? Were you able to work through it, or did it end your relationship? I'm also wondering if there are resources or support groups for spouses who are dealing with this kind of situation. I feel very alone right now and could use some guidance from people who understand what I'm going through. Any advice would be appreciated. I'm completely lost and don't know how to move forward from here. Update, 5 days later. Thank you to everyone who responded to my original post. The feedback helped me realize that I needed to have an honest conversation with Mark rather than continuing to carry the secret alone. I decided to confront Mark yesterday evening, and the conversation was both better and worse than I had expected. When I told Mark that I had looked at his phone and knew about the dating apps and the men he'd been meeting, his immediate reaction was panic. He went completely white and started stammering out apologies. Mark didn't try to deny what I had found or make excuses for his behavior. Instead, he broke down crying and said that he had been terrified that I would find out, but that he was also relieved that he didn't have to hide anymore. Mark told me that he's known he was attracted to men since he was in high school, but that he never told anyone because his family would have lost their shit. He said when his cousin came out as gay a few years ago, his parents and his uncle completely cut him off, and Mark realized he could never be open about his own sexuality. He said that when we met, he was attracted to me and fell in love with me, but that he had also been pushing down his feelings about men for so long that he convinced himself he could just ignore that part of himself forever. Mark said that for the first few years of our marriage, he was able to push those feelings aside and focus on our relationship. But as time went on, he started feeling more and more like he was suffocating and hiding who he really was. He said that the dating app started as a way to just talk to other men who might understand what he was going through, but that it escalated to meeting people because he was desperate to finally experience that part of himself that he'd been denied. Mark was very clear that his encounters with other men weren't about not loving me or not being attracted to me. He said that he loves me and that our physical relationship has always been real for him. But he also admitted that there's a part of his sexuality that he's never been able to explore and that keeping it secret has been eating away at him for years. Mark apologized over and over for cheating on me and for lying to me. He said that he knows there's no excuse for going behind my back and that he should have been honest with me about his struggles instead of betraying our marriage. When I asked Mark what he wants for our future, he said that he wants to stay married to me, but that he also wants to be able to be open about his sexuality instead of hiding it. He said that he's not sure exactly what that would look like, but that he wants us to figure it out together if I'm willing to try it. Mark also said that he would be willing to stop using the dating apps and stop meeting other people if that's what I needed from him, but that he didn't want to go back to pretending that he's not bisexual. I told Mark that I appreciated his honesty and that I could understand why he had been struggling. But I also told him that the cheating and lying had seriously damaged my trust in him and that I wasn't sure our marriage could survive that level of betrayal. I asked Mark why he hadn't felt like he could talk to me about his sexuality, and he said that he was afraid I would leave him or that I would think our entire relationship had been faked. Mark said that he was also afraid that I would assume he was actually gay and just using me as a cover, which is honestly something I had been wondering about. When I asked Mark directly if he's more attracted to men than to women, he said that his attraction to both is real but different. He said that he's attracted to me as a person and that it's not just about gender for him. But he also admitted that there are things about being with men that he's curious about and wants to explore, and that he's been feeling like he's missing out on an important part of himself by not being able to do that. I asked Mark if he thought he could be satisfied in a monogamous marriage with me long term, and he said that he honestly didn't know. He said that he wants to try to make our marriage work, but that he also doesn't want to continue hiding or suppressing his sexuality. The conversation lasted for about 3 hours, and by the end of it, we were both emotionally exhausted. Mark asked if I wanted him to stay somewhere else for a few days to give me space to think, and I said that I thought that would be a good idea. Mark is staying at a hotel right now, and we've agreed to continue talking about this but to take some time apart to process everything. I have an appointment with a therapist tomorrow to help me work through my feelings about this situation. Mark said that he would be willing to do couples counseling if I'm open to it, but I want to do some individual work first. I'm still feeling very conflicted about everything. On one hand, I'm glad that Mark was honest with me about his sexuality and his struggles. I can see that this has been incredibly difficult for him, and I don't want to be someone who makes him feel ashamed of who he is. On the other hand, I'm still very hurt by the cheating and the lies. Even if I can understand why Mark felt like he couldn't tell me about his sexuality, I don't think that justifies going behind my back and having sexual relationships with other people. I'm also still not sure what our future looks like. Mark says he wants to stay married to me, but he also wants to be able to explore his attraction to men. I don't know if those two things are compatible, and I don't know if I'm comfortable with some kind of open marriage arrangement. I love Mark and I want to be supportive of him, but I also need to protect myself and make sure that I'm not staying in a marriage that isn't going to make me happy long term. I'm planning to take things one day at a time and see how I feel after talking to a therapist and having some time to process everything. Update 2 to 2 weeks later. I want to provide another update because the situation has continued to evolve, and I've learned some things that have changed my perspective on everything. First, I've been seeing a therapist individually, and it's been incredibly helpful. My therapist has helped me separate my feelings about Mark's sexuality from my feelings about his cheating, which has been important for me to process everything clearly. Mark and I have also started couples counseling, and we've had some very difficult but productive conversations about our marriage and our future. In our counseling sessions, Mark has been very open about his sexuality and his struggles with it. He's also been taking full responsibility for his cheating and acknowledging how much his lies have hurt me. But I've also learned some things about Mark's experiences that have helped me understand his perspective better. Mark told me more about his family situation. When his cousin David came out 5 years ago, Mark's uncle and aunt completely disowned him. Mark said he watched his cousin lose his entire family overnight, and it terrified him. He said he's been carrying that fear with him ever since, convinced that being open about his sexuality would cost him everyone he loves. Mark also told me that he's been struggling with depression and anxiety related to hiding his sexuality, and that the secrecy has been affecting his mental health for years. He said some days he would wake up feeling like he was suffocating, but he didn't know how to talk to anyone about it. Our couples counselor has been helping us work through the trust issues that Mark's cheating created, but she's also helped me understand that Mark's situation is not uncommon and that there are ways for couples to work through this kind of discovery. However, I've also come to some realizations about myself and what I want from my marriage that have been difficult to accept. Through therapy, I've realized that I need to be with someone who is fully committed to a monogamous relationship with me. While I can accept and support Mark's bisexuality, I'm not comfortable with him exploring that part of his sexuality outside of our marriage. I've also realized that I need to be with someone who chooses to be with me because they want to be with me specifically, not because I'm a safe or convenient option. When I've brought up these concerns with Mark, he's been understanding but also honest about his own needs. He says that he loves me and wants to be with me, but that he's also not sure he can commit to never exploring his attraction to men. Mark has said that he's willing to try to be monogamous, but that he's afraid he'll end up feeling resentful or like he's hiding part of himself again. In our last counseling session, Mark said something that really clarified things for me. He said, "I wish I could be the husband you deserve, but I'm not sure I can be fully satisfied in any relationship where I have to suppress my attraction to men." Mark also said that he's starting to think he might need to explore his sexuality more fully before he can commit to any long-term relationship, whether with me or with anyone else. I appreciated Mark's honesty, but it also made me realize that we might want different things that aren't compatible with each other. I want to be married to someone who is excited about being married to me and who doesn't feel like they're sacrificing who they are to be with me. Mark wants to be able to explore his sexuality and figure out what makes him happy, which I understand, but which isn't something I can be part of. We've decided to separate for now while Mark figures out what he wants, and while I decide what I want for my future. Mark has moved out of our house and is renting a small apartment across town. We're still in counseling together, but we're also both doing individual work to figure out what we want. I'm sad about how things have turned out, but I'm also relieved that we're both being honest about what we need instead of trying to force something that isn't working. I don't know if Mark and I will end up getting divorced or if we'll find a way to make things work, but I feel like we're both being more honest now than we have been in a long time. Mark has started being more open about his sexuality with some close friends, which has been a big step for him. Most people have been supportive, and I think it's been a relief for him to stop hiding that part of himself. As for me, I'm focusing on figuring out what I want my life to look like going forward. I'm continuing with therapy, and I'm spending time with friends and family who have been supportive throughout this process. I'm also trying to take care of myself physically and emotionally. I got tested for STDs, and everything came back negative, which was a huge relief. I don't regret snooping on Mark's phone, even though I know it was wrong. If I hadn't found out about his cheating and his struggles with his sexuality, we might have continued living in a marriage that wasn't honest or satisfying for either of us. While this situation has been incredibly painful, I think it's ultimately going to lead to both of us being happier in the long run. Final update, 7 weeks later. I wanted to provide a final update on my situation because we've reached a resolution, and I think it might be helpful for others who find themselves in similar circumstances. Mark and I are getting divorced. This wasn't an easy decision, and it took us several more weeks of counseling and honest conversations to reach this conclusion. But we both realized that we want different things from our lives that just aren't compatible with each other. Mark has continued to explore his sexuality and has started dating. He hasn't gotten into anything serious yet, but he's been meeting people and figuring out what he wants. He seems lighter somehow, like a weight has been lifted off his shoulders. Mark told me a few weeks ago that he feels like he's breathing freely for the first time in years. He said that while he's sad about our marriage ending, he doesn't regret finally being honest about who he is. Mark has also been able to be more open about his sexuality with his family. It was difficult at first. His parents were shocked and needed time to process, but they've been more supportive than he expected. I think seeing what happened with his cousin David made them realize they didn't want to lose Mark too. Mark has been very respectful throughout our separation and divorce process. He's taken full responsibility for his cheating and has been fair about dividing our assets and debts. He's apologized many times for the way he handled everything, and I believe he's genuinely sorry for the pain he caused me. But he's also been honest that he doesn't think he could have been happy staying in our marriage long term. As for me, I've been doing better than I expected. The divorce process was emotionally difficult, but I feel like I'm in a much clearer place now than I was when I first discovered Mark's secret. I've continued with therapy, and it's helped me work through my feelings of betrayal and my questions about whether our entire marriage was a lie. My therapist helped me understand that Mark's love for me was real, even if our marriage wasn't sustainable given his needs. I've also been able to separate my feelings about Mark's cheating from my feelings about his sexuality. I'm not angry at Mark for being bisexual. That's just who he is. But I am still hurt by the lying and the cheating, though I understand now why he felt like he had no other options. I'm much more aware now of what I want from a relationship and what kinds of honesty and communication are important to me. I've also connected with an online support group for spouses of LGBTQ+ individuals, which has been incredibly helpful. It's been reassuring to talk to other people who have been through similar experiences and to learn about different ways that couples have handled these situations. Some couples in the support group have been able to stay together and find ways to accommodate both partners' needs. Others, like Mark and me, realized that they wanted different things and decided to divorce amicably. There's no right or wrong way to handle this kind of situation. It really depends on what both people in the relationship want and need. Looking back, I don't regret snooping on Mark's phone. While it was a violation of his privacy, it also revealed a situation that needed to be addressed. Mark was miserable hiding his sexuality, and I was unknowingly living in a marriage based on incomplete information. I think we both would have been unhappy if we had continued as we were, even if I had never found out about his cheating or his sexuality. I also don't regret the way I handled the situation once I discovered Mark's secret. We were able to have honest conversations about what we both wanted, and we were able to end our marriage respectfully. Mark and I don't talk regularly anymore, but we're not enemies. We both acknowledge that we had a good marriage for many years, and that it ended not because either of us is a bad person, but because we realized we weren't compatible in some ways that really mattered. For anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation, my advice would be to be honest, both with yourself and with your partner. It's better to have difficult conversations and make hard decisions than to continue living in a situation that isn't working for either person. I'd also recommend professional help, both individual therapy and couples counseling if your partner is willing. This kind of situation brings up a lot of complicated emotions that can be difficult to work through without professional guidance. Finally, I'd encourage anyone in this situation to connect with support groups or online communities of people who have been through similar experiences. It's been incredibly helpful for me to talk to people who understand what I've been going through. I'm doing well now and feel optimistic about my future. This experience has been painful, but it's also taught me a lot about myself and what I want from my relationships. I feel like I know myself better now than I did before, and I'm grateful for that growth even though it came through difficult circumstances. I hope that Mark continues to be happy and honest in his new life, and I'm glad that we were both able to be truthful about what we wanted even though it meant ending our marriage. Sometimes the right thing to do is the hardest thing to do, but I think we both made the right choice for ourselves and for each other.